Hello, my name is William, and welcome to Dragon X Dominion, a realm where dragon legends are forged in fire, honor, and forgotten worlds. I will be your narrator and guide through these epic lands. If you crave powerful stories, legendary dragons, and wars that echo through eternity, then you found your home, ladies and gentlemen. So like, subscribe, and claim your place among these legends.
The rain came down in sheets across the landing platform, something David Reed had not expected to see on a space station. Station Outpost 7 was falling apart in ways that would have been funny if he had anyone to laugh with. The atmosphere processors were broken again, dumping recycled water everywhere instead of distributing it properly through the system. David pulled his jacket tighter and walked toward his cargo ship, boots splashing through puddles that reflected the dim station lights. He had been alone for 8 months now. 8 months of running supplies to places nobody else wanted to go. 8 months of talking to himself just to hear a human voice. The last 3 stations had been automated, just robots loading and unloading cargo while he sat in his cockpit eating protein bars that all tasted like cardboard. Sometimes he forgot what day it was. Sometimes he forgot why he kept doing this. His ship was small, a Marlin-class hauler that could carry just enough cargo to make the fuel costs worthwhile. The hull was covered in scratches from micrometeorites, and the paint had faded from red to a dull pink. David ran his hand along the metal, checking for new damage. The storm had been rough during his approach. He would need to inspect everything before taking off again in a few days. A sound cut through the rain, high-pitched and weak like something in pain. David stopped and listened. There was again, coming from near the waste disposal units at the edge of the platform. He should ignore it. Whatever it was not his problem. He had cargo to check and repairs to plan and a schedule to keep. The sound came again, sadder this time. David cursed under his breath and walked toward the noise. His boots were already soaked anyway. The waste disposal area was dark, lit only by a single failing light that flickered every few seconds. In the shadows between 2 large containers, something moved. David pulled out his flashlight and pointed it into the gap. The dragon stared back at him. It was small, roughly the size of a large dog, with scales that should have been silver but looked gray and dull in the rain. One wing was folded against its body normally, but the other stuck out at a wrong angle, clearly broken. The creature was shaking, its whole body trembling from cold or pain or both. Water dripped from its snout, and the membrane of its wings hung loose and wrinkled. David knew what it was. Drakari. He had seen pictures and videos, heard the stories. They were fierce warriors and hunters, proud and dangerous. They worked as mercenaries across the galaxy, hired by anyone who could afford them and did not mind the body count. A full-grown Drakari could tear through an armored door. Their fire could melt ship hulls. This one looked like it might die in the next hour. The dragon made that sound again, softer now, and its copper-colored eyes met David's. There was no aggression in that look, just pain and fear and exhaustion. "Hey there," David said quietly. "You look pretty bad." The dragon's eyes followed him, but it did not move. It was too weak to run or fight. Just a young thing that had ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. David thought about walking away. The smart choice was to pretend he had never seen it. Drakari meant trouble. Their clans were violent and territorial. If this one belonged to someone, helping it might bring a warship down on his head. If it was alone, it might attack him once it got strong enough. But the rain kept falling and the dragon kept shaking, and David found himself taking off his thermal jacket. "I'm going to help you," he said, not sure if the dragon could understand trade language. "Try not to bite me." He moved slowly, keeping his hands visible. The dragon watched him with those large eyes, but did not resist when he wrapped the jacket around its body. It was lighter than he expected, all bone and scales with not enough meat underneath. He could feel its heart beating fast against his chest as he lifted it. The walk back to his ship felt longer than it was. The dragon stayed still in his arms, occasionally making small sounds that might have been distress or might have been something else. David's ship recognized him and opened the cargo ramp. He carried the dragon inside, through the cargo bay and into his small living quarters at the back. There was not much space. A bunk bed, a storage locker, a tiny bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. David cleared the floor and laid the dragon down on his spare blanket. He grabbed his heat lamp, the one he used when his ship's heating failed, and set it up pointing at the dragon. Then he dug through his emergency medical kit. The wing was definitely broken. David had set bones before, back when he lived on the colony, back when he had a family and a reason to learn useful skills. His hands remembered what to do even if his heart was not in it anymore. He splinted the wing as carefully as he could, using metal strips and soft cloth to hold everything in place. The dragon watched him the whole time, making small sounds but not pulling away. "There," David said when he finished. "That should help." He found a bowl and filled it with water. The dragon sniffed it and drank a little. David opened one of his protein bars and set it nearby, but the dragon just looked at it without interest. David sat back against the wall. The dragon was still shivering, slightly despite the heat lamp. Its scales were starting to look a bit brighter, less gray and more silver. It kept watching him with those copper eyes, like it was trying to figure out if he was safe or just another danger in a dangerous galaxy. "You can stay here tonight," David said. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do with you." The dragon blinked slowly and tucked its head down, resting on the blanket. David grabbed his pillow and headed to the cockpit. He would sleep in the pilot chair. It would not be the first time that as he settled into the chair, he could hear the dragon breathing in the other room. Slow and steady now, not the rapid panic breath from before. David closed his eyes and realized something. For the first time in 8 months, he was not alone in his ship. For the first time in longer than that, he had done something that felt like it mattered. Outside, the rain continued to fall on the broken station. Inside, 2 lost souls tried to get warm. Sunlight filtered through the cockpit window, artificial but warm enough to make David squint as he woke. His neck ached from sleeping in the pilot chair, and his back complained as he stretched. The events of last night felt like a strange dream until he heard a soft scratching sound from his quarters. The dragon was awake. David stood slowly and walked to the doorway. The dragon had moved from the blanket and was now sitting upright, looking around the small room with obvious curiosity. Its scales had changed from dull gray to bright silver overnight, catching the light like polished metal. The broken wing was still splinted against its body, but the other wing stretched out slightly as the dragon tested its movement. "Morning," David said. The dragon's head snapped toward him, ears perking up. It made a small chirping sound, nothing like the fearsome roars he had heard in videos of Drakari warriors. This sound was almost musical, like a question. "You look better," David continued, moving to the small food storage unit. "You need to eat something." He tried offering different things. The protein bars got ignored again. Dried fruit was sniffed and rejected. Finally, he found some emergency rations at the back of the storage. Protein paste in silver packets that was supposed to last forever and tasted like absolutely nothing. The dragon sniffed it, licked it once, then started eating. David smiled despite himself. "Not picky, huh? That's good. I don't exactly run a fancy restaurant here." While the dragon ate, David pulled up his datapad and searched for information on Drakari. The station's database was limited, but it had the basics. Drakari came from a volcanic world called Scorch, a place of extreme heat and violent geological activity. They were pack creatures, living in clans of 10 to 30 individuals. Their social structure was complex and rigid, based on combat prowess and family bloodlines. What caught David's attention was a section on bonding. Drakari bonded for life with their clan members. Being alone was considered a fate worse than death. Drakari who lost their clans often became unstable, either going mad with grief or dying within months. The article mentioned that no case of a Drakari successfully living alone for more than a year had ever been documented. "So you're supposed to be with others," David said, looking at the dragon. "What happened to your clan?" The dragon finished eating and looked at him. It tilted its head to one side, a gesture that seemed almost like it was trying to understand his words. David knew it probably did not speak trade language, but something about its focus made him think it understood more than it could say. "I'm going to call you Frost," David decided, "because of those silver scales and because you were cold when I found you." "That okay?" The dragon, Frost, made that chirping sound again. It did not seem like an objection. The next 3 days fell into a pattern. David worked on repairs to his ship during the day, replacing a burned-out power coupling and patching small holes in the hull. Frost followed him everywhere, limping on 3 legs with the injured wing held carefully against its body. The dragon watched everything David did with intense curiosity, making small sounds when something interested it. David talked while he worked. He had not talked this much in months. He told Frost about his cargo routes, about the stations he visited, about how his coffee maker had broken 2 months ago and he had been drinking instant powder mixed with hot water ever since. He talked about the colony where he used to live, though he did not mention his family. That was still too painful. Frost listened to everything. Sometimes the dragon would make responding sounds, little chirps and rumbles that David started to recognize. A quick chirp seemed to mean interest or agreement. A low rumble meant contentment. A sharp sound meant discomfort or warning that on the second day, David changed the wing splint. Frost stayed perfectly still while he worked, trusting him completely. The wing was healing well, no infection or complications. In a few weeks, it should be usable again. That on the third day, Frost ate from his hand without hesitation. That evening, David sat at his quarters with his datapad, researching Drakari settlements. The nearest one was 3 systems away, a mining operation on an asteroid where a small clan worked for a Quilarian corporation. He could take Frost there. The dragon would be with its own kind again, safe and cared for properly. I should probably take you to other Drakari, David said aloud. They would know how to help you better than I can. You belong with your own species. Frost was curled up on the blanket nearby, the heat lamp still warming its scales. At David's words, the dragon's eyes opened. It made a sound David had not heard before, sharp and distressed, and scrambled to its feet despite the injured wing. Frost moved close to David and pressed against his leg, looking up at him with those copper eyes. "Hey, it's okay," David said, confused by the reaction. "I'm just thinking out loud." But Frost did not move away. The dragon stayed pressed against him, making small, anxious sounds. David reached down and touched the silver scales, feeling the warmth beneath them. Frost leaned into his touch, the distressed sounds fading to soft rumbles. David sat there for a long time, his hand on Frost's head, and realized something that made his chest feel tight. He did not want Frost to leave. His ship had felt empty for so long. Just him and the silence and the endless routes through space. But now there was someone else here. Someone who listened when he talked, who followed him around, who seemed to want his company as much as he wanted theirs. "Maybe you could stay a bit longer," David said quietly. "Just until your wing is completely healed. Then we'll see." Frost made a happy chirping sound and settled down with its head resting on David's knee. Outside the ship, Station Outpost 7 continued its slow decay. Inside, a lonely human and a lost dragon found something neither had expected. They found each other, and for now, that was enough. 2 weeks had passed since leaving Station Outpost 7. David's ship, the Marlin, was currently crossing through the Verge sector, a region of space known mostly for small mining operations and people who wanted to be left alone. Frost had claimed the co-pilot chair as its personal spot, sitting there for hours while watching stars streak past during faster-than-light travel. The dragon had grown in those 2 weeks. Not much in size, but in confidence. Frost no longer limped when walking through the ship. The injured wing was still splinted, but healing faster than David had expected. Most importantly, Frost had started making more sounds, experimenting with different tones and pitches like it was learning a language. Their first delivery together was to Bitter Ridge, a moon where miners extracted rare metals from deep underground. David had made this run a dozen times before, always alone, always just business. This time felt different with Frost sitting in the cargo bay as David prepared to open the loading ramp. "You should probably stay in here," David said, checking his cargo manifest. "Drakari make people nervous." Frost tilted its head and made a questioning chirp. "I'm serious. Your species has a reputation. People see those scales and they think warrior, mercenary, danger. Just stay hidden until I'm done, okay?" The ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss. 3 miners waited outside, wearing heavywork suits and carrying tools that could double as weapons if needed. David recognized the lead miner, a human woman named Sandra who ran the operation. Reed, Sandra called out. You're 2 days late. Had some delays at Outpost 7, David replied, walking down the ramp. But I've got your full order. Drilling components, replacement filters, and those medical supplies you requested. He turned to grab the first container and nearly jumped. Frost was standing right behind him, silver scales gleaming in the moon's harsh sunlight. The miners froze. Hands went to their tools. Sandra took a step back, her eyes going wide. That's a Drakari, she said, her voice tight. This is Frost, David said, forcing himself to stay calm. Frost is with me. Won't cause any trouble. Drakari don't travel with humans. One of the other miners said, a Quilarian with 4 arms that were all tensing for a fight. They don't travel with anyone outside their clans. Well, this one does. David moved to stand between Frost and the miners. Now, do you want these supplies, or should I take them somewhere else? Sandra's eyes moved from Frost to David and back again. The dragon sat down, mimicking the posture David had seen it used dozens of times on the ship. Calm, relaxed, not threatening. Frost's tail curled around its feet, and its ears perked forward in an expression that almost looked curious. It's really just sitting there, Sandra said, sounding amazed. Frost is very well behaved, David said, relaxing slightly. The unloading took an hour. The miners kept watching Frost, but the dragon never moved from its spot except to tilt its head when something interested it. By the end, Sandra was standing close enough to take a picture with her datapad. I've been mining for 20 years, she said. Never thought I'd see a tame Drakari. Not tame, David corrected, loading payment credits onto his account chip. Just friendly. As the Marlin lifted off, David noticed Frost looking at him with what might have been amusement. Don't let it go to your head, he said. You were showing off. Frost chirped happily. Word spread fast in the Verge sector. At the next delivery, people were waiting to see the human with a dragon. At the one after that, someone offered to buy Frost for an absurd amount of credits. David had refused immediately, surprised by how angry the suggestion made him. During long stretches between deliveries, David worked with Frost on the injured wing. He removed the splint carefully, checking the bone alignment. Everything had healed straight and strong. Now came the hard part, rebuilding the muscles that had weakened during recovery. They practiced in the cargo bay, the largest open space on the ship. David would hold Frost steady while the dragon extended both wings, stretching the membrane and testing the joints. At first, Frost could barely hold the injured wing up for more than a few seconds. But each day it got stronger. Try flapping, David encouraged. Just small movements. Frost's wings moved, creating a small breeze in the enclosed space. The dragon wobbled, unbalanced, and David caught it before it could fall. Good, David said, his hand supporting Frost's chest. Really good. Try again. They practiced every day. Frost went from barely flapping to making small hops across the cargo bay floor. Then from hops to glides. The day Frost managed to fly a complete circuit around the cargo bay, staying airborne for a full minute. David cheered loud enough that his voice echoed off the metal walls. Frost landed gracefully and made a sound David had never heard before. It was almost like laughter, high and musical. The dragon ran to him and bumped its head against his chest, purring like some kind of giant cat. You did it, David said, scratching behind Frost's ears. I knew you could. 3 weeks after leaving Station Outpost 7, everything changed. David was updating his navigation charts when an alert sounded. Incoming transmission, priority channel. He accepted it and a Drakari appeared on his screen. This one was huge, easily twice the size of a full-grown human. Its scales were deep crimson and covered in scars. One eye was blind, clouded white. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding stones. Human. I am General Crost of the Red Storm clan. You have something that belongs to us. A young silver dragon, stolen from our territory. David's blood went cold. Frost, who had been sleeping in the quarters, came running at the sound of that voice. The dragon saw the screen and made a sound of pure fear, shrinking back against the wall. I didn't steal anyone, David said carefully. I found Frost injured and alone. That hatchling is clan property, Cross growled. It was promised to another clan in a bonding agreement. When it fled, it shamed my entire bloodline. You will return it immediately or face consequences. Frost doesn't want to go back, David said, looking at the terrified dragon. I'm not handing anyone over to be forced into something they don't want. Cross good I narrowed. You are in no position to refuse, human. My ship is faster than yours. My weapons are superior. I am giving you one chance to comply. After that, I will take what is mine from your corpse. The transmission ended. David sat in silence for a moment, his mind racing. Then Frost moved close, pressing against his leg like it had that first night. David reached down and felt the dragon trembling. Not from cold this time, from fear. The Marlin limped into refuge point 18 hours later, trailing coolant vapor and making sounds that ships should definitely not make. Station security met them at the docking bay, weapons ready and shields up. David could not blame them. His ship looked like it had been through a war. This is Security Chief Holloway. A voice came over the comm, state your business, and be aware that we have you in our sights. David Reed, independent cargo hauler, David replied, exhaustion making his voice rough. Requesting emergency docking and asylum. I was attacked by Drakari Warclan ships. There was a pause. Did you say Drakari Warclan? Yes. Please, my ship is barely holding together. I have an injured passenger. Another pause, longer this time. Then the docking clamps activated and pulled his ship into a secure bay. The moment David opened the hatch, 6 armed guards surrounded him. They all tensed when Frost stepped out behind him, but David moved to block their line of fire. Frost is with me, he said firmly. We're both requesting asylum under Galactic Council law. One of the guards, a tall human woman with gray hair and tired eyes, lowered her weapon slightly. You're saying a Drakari is seeking asylum? From other Drakari? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. They were escorted to the station's administrative center, a large circular room with windows overlooking the docking bays. Director Bryn waited there, a Quilarian with blue skin and 4 arms that moved in constant, nervous patterns. She looked at David, then at Frost, then back at David. This is highly unusual, she said. David explained everything. Finding Frost in the rain, the healing process, General Cross threats, the chase through the asteroid field. Frost stayed pressed against his leg the whole time, occasionally making small sounds that emphasized parts of the story. Director Bryn listened carefully, her 4 hands moving in patterns that David's datapad identified as thoughtful consideration in Quilarian body language. General Cross has already filed a legal complaint, she said. He claims you kidnapped a juvenile clan member. Under Drakari law, he has the right to reclaim it. Under Galactic Council law, David countered, Frost has the right to refuse situations that cause harm. Check your medical records. You have doctors here who work with Drakari physiology, right? Bryn gestured to a medical officer who had been standing quietly in the corner. The officer, a Hetherian with 6 eyes and tentacle-like fingers, approached Frost cautiously. Frost looked at David for permission. He nodded. The examination took an hour. David waited in a small room with clear walls, watching through the transparent barrier as doctors scanned Frost with various instruments. He could see Frost looking for him every few minutes, making sure he had not left. The medical officer returned with a datapad full of readings. The young Drakari is healthy now, but shows signs of malnutrition and stress from before you found it. The wing was broken cleanly and healed perfectly. But there's something else. She pulled up an image showing Frost's skeletal structure. This dragon is very young, barely past hatching stage in terms of development. Drakari don't participate in bonding ceremonies until they're at least 3 years mature. This one is maybe 1 year old, if that. Director Bryn's 4 hands stopped moving. Are you saying what I think you're saying? The bonding General Cross mentioned would have been premature, the medical officer said. Potentially harmful to the dragon's psychological development. In some cases, it could cause permanent trauma. By Galactic Council health standards, this would qualify as abuse. David felt relief and anger mix in his chest. He had been right. They had hurt Frost, or were planning to. No wonder the dragon had run. They moved to a hearing room. General Cross appeared on a large screen, his scarred face filling the display. Behind him stood a dozen Drakari warriors, all looking ready for violence. Cross one good I fixed on Frost, who shrank back behind David. Return my clan's property, Cross demanded. This human has poisoned the hatchling's mind. Drakari do not bond with other species. This is unnatural and wrong. Frost can speak for itself, David said, looking down at the dragon. Tell them what you want. Frost was trembling, but it stepped forward. When it spoke, the words came clearer than before, stronger. Not. Go. Back. David. Pack. Choose. Him. Frost roared, the sound distorting the speakers. That hatchling doesn't have a right to choose. It's too young, too damaged. I'm invoking trial by combat. Ancient law. I will fight the human personally for ownership. Director Bryn's hands moved in agitated patterns. General, trial by combat is not recognized by Galactic Council law, but it is recognized by Drakari law. And that hatchling is Drakari. The human wants to keep it? Let him fight for it. When I kill him, this matter will be settled. David felt cold. He was not a warrior. He knew how to fly ships and move cargo and survive alone in space. Fighting a fully grown Drakari general in combat would be suicide. Cross knew it. This was just murder with extra steps. Before anyone could respond, Frost moved. The dragon placed itself between David and the screen, spreading its wings wide. When it spoke, its voice was louder than David had ever heard it. No. Fight. David. My. Pack. My. Choose. Old. Law. Says. Dragon. Choose. Pack. Sacred. Cross paused. Around him, the other Drakari warriors were making sounds, murmuring to each other. One of them, an older dragon with gray scales, stepped forward and spoke quickly to Cross in their own language. Director Bryn's translator caught some of it. Ancient bonding law predates clan system. Sacred right. Cannot be challenged. Cross scales flared with rage, but the other dragons were nodding, agreeing with the gray-scaled elder. Finally, Cross snarled at the screen. Fine. The old law stands. But you, human, have made an enemy today. The Red Storm clan will remember this insult. The transmission ended. David let out a breath he did not know he was holding. Director Bryn's 4 hands moved in what his datapad identified as relief. The ruling stands, she said officially. Frost is granted asylum. You both are free to remain on Refuge Point or leave as you choose. David looked down at Frost. The dragon was still pressed against him, but no longer trembling. Those copper eyes met his and Frost made a sound that was almost like a purr. We'll stay a few days, David said. Get the ship repaired. Then we'll figure out what comes next. But he already knew. Whatever came next, they would face it together. David changed course immediately, pushing the Marlin toward Refuge Point. It was a neutral station run by the Galactic Council, 3 days away at maximum speed. If he could get there, Cross could not touch them without violating dozens of treaties. But 3 days was a long time when someone with a warship wanted you dead. Frost stayed close the entire time, rarely leaving the cockpit. The dragon had become quiet, making almost no sounds except for small anxious chirps when David stood up to get food or check systems. Every time an alert beeped, Frost would tense, ears flat against its head. It's going to be okay, David said, though he was not sure he believed it. We just need to reach Refuge Point. On the second day, his sensors picked up a ship dropping out of faster-than-light travel directly in their path. It was massive, 10 times the size of the Marlin, bristling with weapon ports and armored plating. Drakari design, built for war. David's hands tightened on the controls. No, no, no. Not yet. We're so close. The comm system crackled to life. General Cross' scarred face filled the screen again, and this time David could see other Drakari warriors behind him. All of them looked ready for violence. End of the line, human, Cross said. Surrender the hatchling now. This is your final warning. David looked at Frost. The dragon was shaking, staring at the screen with wide eyes. David had learned to read Frost's expressions over the past weeks. This was not just fear. This was terror mixed with something else. Betrayal, maybe, or the memory of pain. What did you do to Frost? David asked, his voice harder than he intended. What happened before it ran away? Cross snorted. That hatchling was property. Weak scales, small size, worthless in combat. But another clan wanted it for breeding purposes. Political alliance. The hatchling had one duty, and it fled like a coward. Frost has a name, David said. And Frost isn't property. You have 1 hour, Cross replied. Comply or be destroyed. Your choice. The screen went dark. David sat in silence, his mind working through possibilities. The Marlin was not a fighting ship. It had basic shields that could maybe survive 2 hits before failing. The engines were decent, but nothing compared to a military vessel. In a straight fight, he would lose in under a minute. Frost made a small sound. David turned and saw the dragon looking at him with those copper eyes. They were filled with sadness and resignation. Then Frost spoke. The words were rough, pronunciation broken, but they were clear enough to understand. Trade language, the basic form used across the galaxy for business and simple communication. No, Frost said, voice small and uncertain. Stay. You. Pack. David felt like he had been punched. You can talk? This whole time. Hard, Frost continued, struggling with each word. Learning. Listening. You. Kind. You. Pack. Now. The dragon moved closer, pressing its head against David's arm. More words came, faster now, like a dam breaking. They. Hurt. Me. Small. Weak. Bad. You. Found. Zen. Cold. Saved. They. Bad. You. Good. You. Pack. David felt something crack in his chest. All those weeks of talking to Frost, thinking he was alone in the conversation. But Frost had been listening, understanding, learning, trying to find a way to communicate back. I'm not letting them take you, David said firmly. He opened the comm channel to Cross ship. General, I have an answer for you. Cross appeared on screen, looking satisfied, finally showing sense. Frost stays with me, David said. That's not negotiable. The general's expression darkened. Scales around his neck flared with rage. Then you choose death. So be it. Weapon locks appeared on David's sensors. 6 different targeting systems, painting his ship. Frost made a terrified sound and buried its head against David's side. I am sorry, David whispered. I'm so sorry. Then he did the only thing he could think of. He grabbed the controls and dove. The Marlin shot downward, using its much smaller size and better maneuverability to slip under the warship. Plasma bolts screamed past, superheating the air where they had been seconds before. David pushed the engines to maximum, heading for the asteroid field he had spotted on his sensors earlier. Hold on, he told Frost. The asteroid field was dense, hundreds of rocks spinning and tumbling in chaotic patterns. Navigation was nightmare fuel for any pilot. David had no choice. He dove into it, weaving between rocks the size of buildings while Cross warship followed. Firing continuously, a bolt clipped their shields. The Marlin shuddered and alarms blared. Another hit, and they would be done. David cut power to everything except engines and maneuvering thrusters. The ship went dark except for emergency lights. He flew by instinct and luck. Right past a spinning boulder. Hard left to avoid a collision. Up and over a cluster of smaller rocks. Behind him, the warship was firing blind, unable to track his signature in the dense field. But it was bigger, slower, less able to change direction quickly. David heard an explosion. He risked a glance at the sensors. The warship had clipped an asteroid, damage showing on its port side. It was falling behind, trying to navigate more carefully now. Come on, David urged his ship. Just a little more. They burst out the other side of the field. David immediately jumped to faster-than-light travel, not even bothering to plot a proper course. The stars stretched into lines, and then they were away, leaving the warship trapped in the asteroids that David's hand were shaking so hard he could barely hold the controls. His heart was pounding. The ship was damaged, shields gone, hull scorched in 3 places. But they were alive. Frost was making continuous sounds now, pressing against him, checking him over like it was worried he was hurt. David wrapped an arm around the dragon and held tight. We made it, he said, voice unsteady. We actually made it. They traveled for 6 hours before David felt safe enough to stop and check the damage. The ship would hold together long enough to reach refuge point. Just barely at AS, they drifted in empty space, running silent to avoid detection. Frost curled up next to David's chair. The dragon was exhausted from fear and adrenaline. Before falling asleep, it spoke one more time. Thank you, Pack. David put his hand on Frost's head and closed his eyes. Pack. That's what they were now. Not just a human and a dragon sharing a ship. Something more. Something worth fighting for. News of the hearing spread through Refuge Point within hours. David had not expected to become famous, but everywhere he and Frost went, people stopped to stare. Some approached to offer congratulations. Others just wanted to see the dragon that had invoked ancient law against a war clan general. A Quilarian engineer named Tavis approached David in the docking bay the next morning. Heard you need repairs, he said, his forearms gesturing at the damaged Marlin. I'll do it for cost of parts only. What you did yesterday, standing up to Cross like that. We need more people willing to do the right thing. Over the next week, others helped too. A Hitherian trader donated a new shield generator. A human mechanic replaced the burned power couplings. An elderly Drakari with pale green scales brought Frost a heated blanket woven with metallic threads that reflected body heat. For the young one, the old dragon said in heavily accented trade language. It showed courage, rare thing these days. Frost accepted the blanket and made happy chirping sounds, immediately wrapping it around its shoulders like a cloak. David thanked the old Drakari, who just nodded and walked away. During the repairs, David and Frost explored the station. Refuge Point was bigger than David had expected, home to thousands of beings from hundreds of species. Many were refugees like them, fleeing conflicts or persecution. There were shops selling food from dozens of worlds, entertainment centers, gardens growing under artificial sunlight. Frost was fascinated by everything. The dragon would stop to examine strange plants, watch other species with curious eyes, and ask David questions in its improving trade language. What? That? Why? Blue? Can eat. David found himself smiling more than he had in years. Teaching Frost about the galaxy, watching the dragon discover new things, it reminded him of better times. Times when he had a family and purpose beyond just surviving Point one evening. They sat in the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars. The deck was quiet, just a few other people scattered around, lost in their own thoughts. Frost sat next to David's chair, the metallic blanket wrapped around its shoulders, scales gleaming in the reflected starlight. Tell. About. Before. Frost said quietly. Before. Ship. Before. Alone. David hesitated. He had not talked about this with anyone, not even himself, not properly. But Frost looked at him with those copper eyes, and somehow it felt safe. I had a family once, David said. A wife and a daughter. We lived on a colony called New Spring. It was beautiful. Green everywhere, clean air, good people. Frost made a soft, encouraging sound. There was an accident. Life support system failed in the residential sector. Some engineer cut corners, used cheap parts. By the time anyone realized what was wrong, it was too late. David's voice caught. I was off-world, picking up supplies. When I got back, they were gone, along with 200 other people. Sad, Frost said simply. Your pack. Gone. Yeah, my pack was gone. David wiped his eyes. I couldn't stay there after that. Too many memories. So I got the ship and just started running cargo. Kept moving so I didn't have to think about it. Kept alone so I wouldn't lose anyone again. Frost shifted closer, pressing its warm scales against David's leg. But find me in Zen. Save me. Even. Sad. Even. Alone. Save me. I guess I did. Make. New. Pack, Frost said. You. Me. Together. New. Pack. David looked down at the dragon and felt something shift in his chest. Frost was right. He had been so afraid of losing someone again that he had stopped letting anyone in. But here was this dragon, this creature from a completely different species, offering exactly what David had been too scared to look for. Family. Pack. Home. Yeah, David said, his voice rough with emotion. New pack. You and me. Frost made that sound like purring and rested its head on David's knee. Director Bryn found them the next day with a proposal. "I've been thinking," she said, her four hands moving in thoughtful patterns. "Refuge Point needs reliable transport for supplies. We deal with a lot of stations like this one, places that help refugees and outcasts. The routes aren't glamorous, but they pay well." Interested, David considered it. Regular work, steady income, and more importantly, routes through safer space where war clans were less likely to cause trouble. It meant staying in this part of the galaxy, building connections instead of running. Duddy looked at Frost. The dragon's wings were fully healed now, strong and flexible. Frost could fly properly, soaring through the station's large cargo bays during practice sessions. The dragon had grown too, scales brighter, movements more confident. "What do you think?" David asked. Frost tilted its head, then spoke carefully. "Stay. Here. Good. Help. Others. Like. Us. Good. Then we'll take the job," David told Director Bryn. They spent another week on Refuge Point, making final preparations. David upgraded his ship's systems with the help of station engineers. Frost learned more trade language every day, sometimes practicing with other Drakari refugees who were amazed by the young dragon's vocabulary. But on their last night, before the first supply run, David and Frost sat in the observation deck again. The Marlin was fully repaired now, better than it had been in years. The cargo hold was loaded with medical supplies bound for a refugee station 2 days away. "Ready for this?" David asked. Frost stood and stretched both wings, the metallic blanket falling away. The dragon's scales caught the light, bright silver and healthy. When Frost spoke, the words came easily now, still accented but clear. "Ready. We. Go. Together. Always. Together." David stood and grabbed his jacket. As they walked toward the docking bay, Frost stayed close, matching his pace perfectly. Other station residents called out goodbyes and good luck. Tavis waved from his workshop. The old green-scaled Drakari nodded respectfully. They boarded the Marlin together. David took the pilot's seat and Frost settled in the co-pilot chair, looking at the controls with interest. "Teach me fly?" the dragon asked hopefully. "Yeah," David said, starting the pre-flight sequence. "I'll teach you everything." The docking clamps released, and the Marlin pulled away from Refuge Point, heading out into open space. David plotted their course while Frost watched, asking questions about each step. The stars stretched out before them, full of possibilities. David had been alone for so long, running from pain and loss. Frost had been abandoned, fleeing from cruelty and fear. Two lost souls who found each other in the rain on a broken station. They had built something new together. Not just survival, but a real life. A real family. The galaxy was vast and sometimes harsh, but it was better when you had someone by your side. Someone who chose you and who you chose back. That was what made a pack, a clan, a family. Not blood or species or law, but choice and love and staying. As the Marlin jumped to faster than light travel, David reached over and scratched behind Frost's ears. The dragon made a happy sound and leaned into his touch, eyes half closed with contentment. They were going home, not to a place, but to each other. And that was enough.